The following podcast is a presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Welcome to the Sample Chapter podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
And welcome to episode 183 of the Sample Chapter podcast. I am your host, Jason A. Meiske. Hey, I hope you had yourself a great 4th of July. I hope your weekend was wonderful and you got to have a safe and relaxing time. I know I did. Plus, I got to celebrate my wife's birthday. Her birthday is the 4th of July, so she is my firecracker in every sense of the word. She really lights up my life. You know, what can I say? I mean, it's a good time getting to set off fireworks and be around all the grandkids, and it was a nice weekend. Hey, this week we have a very special guest. Actually, our second host from the Semi-Sages of the Pages podcast. This week's guest is Sarah Faxon. She is here today talking about her new book, Tiny Dreadfuls. It's a collection of kind of like paranormal thriller horror type stories, very spooky, and the story she's going to be reading today is very chilling, and you're going to be wondering by the end of it what in the world is going on. It's a great story. I can't wait to share that with you. But during the interview, we're going to have a great talk. We're talking about drawing inspiration from author podcasts, discovering your genres, and exploring more options within yourself. We talk about book trailers, which is a side service that she does, so something for you to look into. And we talk about genre blending. So much great stuff going on in this interview. You're going to really love it, so stay tuned for that's coming up here in just a few moments. Now, I do want to add, Sarah is, like me, a fan of our sponsor, Scrivener. She uses it with her writing, just like I do. All of our writing goes down in there, and it's such a great tool, one that you definitely want to check out. So listen to this advertisement and learn how you can save 20% on the regular desktop version. Jason here. Hey, I wanted to take a moment and tell you about my favorite writing tool, Scrivener. Now, I know you've heard about Scrivener because their writing software has been embraced by hundreds of thousands of other writers like you and I, from the novice to best-selling novelists. The reason we all use it is because of Scrivener's core concept to bring all the writing tools you use together in a single application. And with tools like automatic backup, character maps, project goals, and let's not forget that amazing corkboard, you can see why I use Scrivener every day. As a bonus for Sample Chapter podcast listeners, use code CHAPTER for 20% off your desktop version. Scrivener writing software, built by writers for writers. Thank you once again to Scrivener. That is an awesome deal and one that you need to click on and get over there. Don't forget that coupon code CHAPTER whenever you go to check out and save yourself some money. Hey, do you like audiobooks? Do you like having the books read to you? Because I do. And here's an advertisement for you to get yourself a free 30-day trial. Hello friends, Jason here, and I wanted to take a moment to tell you about a great offer from Audible. Like you, I'm very busy. I have a full-time job, a family, I'm a thriller author, and I do this weekly podcast. But I also love to read. That's where Audible is a lifesaver for me. Whether I'm mowing the yard, working out, driving back and forth to work, or doing some other menial task, I can still listen to an incredible book through Audible. And now you can get a free 30-day trial by going to audibletrial.com/samplechapter. By doing that, you'll not only have that 30-day trial, you'll also gain access to guided wellness programs, theatrical performances, A-list comedy, exclusive Audible originals, and even podcasts like the Sample Chapter podcast. Last year is the first time I ever achieved my own personal reading goals, and it was because of some wonderful titles I listened to on Audible. Some of those titles were Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline, narrated by Will Wheaton, the Awaken Online series from Travis Bagwell, narrated by David Stiefel, Patient Zero by Jonathan Mayberry, narrated by the incredible Ray Porter, And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention previous guest Scott Meyer with his Magic 2.0 series, narrated by Luke Daniels. It's a lot of fun and definitely worth your time. Hey, full disclosure, by signing up at audibletrial.com/samplechapter, the show does get a little monetization, which goes directly towards any production needs with the show. So you're also helping us out here by signing up. So what are you waiting for? Head on over now to audibletrial.com/samplechapter and start your free 30-day trial today. All right, thank you once again to Audible for partnering with the show and making this great offer. I also want to thank my friends at Pop Culture Network, home to about a dozen other shows, all kinds of podcast shows over there, all of them pop culture related. Two Dads Review, the Alamo Drafthouse Backlot, the Pop Culture Podcast, in fact. A lot of great shows and plenty of stuff for you to go and check out. If you are a fan of pop culture, they have a show for you. You need to also go and check out the Project Entertainment Network, home to a little over 30, because I know a couple of the shows have come to an end. Very sad. The main one that really not upset me, but it was sad to see it go, was Armand Rosamilla's Armcast podcast. I was a guest on before, and but I mean, he did 400 episodes, and that's nothing to laugh at. That was a lot. But that show has come to an end. They're still available for you to check out, though. So you can go in and check out the backlist. Look up my episode if you like. I think I was there around episode 200, something like that. 200, 250, somewhere around there is when I was a guest on it. But so many great shows for you to go and check out. Like I said, about 30 different ones. Wide variety of shows. Check out this advertisement for one of those incredible shows.
Are you so tired of having your own thoughts? Are you just totally exhausted having your own beliefs on every single thing in the entire world?
Well, don't worry. Here at Your New Opinion, we do the thinking for you.
Join Ryan,
Nick,
and Ben
as the boys debate topics that we probably know nothing about, using every dirty trick they can think of to win.
Everything from if net neutrality is good or bad, to cake versus pie, to who killed JFK.
So if you're looking to never have your own thoughts again, check out Your New Opinion every Friday.
All right, so that's a great show. One you definitely ought to click on the links and check it out. You want to make sure that you're also following all of these sponsors, partners, and podcast friends on social media. Just like the Sample Chapter Podcast, we are available on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So get in there, look for the Sample Chapter Podcast, and you can follow us. You can also go to the website of samplechapterpodcast.com and click the link there for all of our social media. Make sure that whenever you follow us on whatever platform you want to follow from, give me a shout out. Let me know where you're listening from, anywhere from around the world, because I know we've got a lot of listens overseas. So not just here in America. America is our biggest one to date, but I know India is another one. That's a huge followers of us right now, thanks to the Ghana podcast player that we became a part of several months ago, and that's incredible. I don't know if there's a special way for me to say hello, but if you are in India, make sure to give me a shout out on social media and let me know that you're there and listening to the episode. Maybe even tell me what one of your favorite episodes are so far. Hey, if you are not a social media person, but you'd like to reach out, you can do so at samplechapterpodcast@gmail.com. I have been doing good at catching up on emails and responding to several author requests, getting my July and August loaded up right now. We have a lot of really good episodes coming up. So if you want to give me another one, you can do so at samplechapterpodcast@gmail.com. Of course, you can also leave me a voicemail, and I would love to get some voicemails from y'all sometime by calling 1-660-851-1146. And just leave me a voicemail. Tell me something you like. Tell me how your holiday weekend went. Tell me if you're working on something that you're writing right now, or tell me about one of your favorite episodes. Anything you like, tell me about it, and I'm going to play that on an upcoming episode. All right. That's enough of all the legal stuff, all the side stuff that I needed to make sure and mention. Now it's time to get us on over to our wonderful conversation She is so positive. Just so much positivity. You're going to love this. It's episode 183 with Sarah Faxon. Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Hey, this week we are sitting down with a wonderful guest from a show that I've talked about twice before now. Previous guest Teresa Halverson is a part of the show, and now I have another one of the wonderful ladies of the Semi-Sages of the Pages podcast, Sarah Faxon. Fantasy author, podcaster, YouTuber, and interested in helping other authors tell their tales is Sarah Faxon. She is a creative warrior with awards and, like I said, the wonderful show. And most importantly, she loves the sound of rain and the scent of ink on legal pads. Legal pads. Something I can definitely relate to. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here.
I love having you here, and we got to talk a little bit before. I love the show. I love the Semi-Sages, and I guess we can just kind of start there. And how did you get involved with the Semi-Sages?
It's really funny. We never planned it, really. We met at the La Jolla Writers Conference, which is a really big writing conference here in San Diego and Southern California. And we were attending workshops together and just sort of saw each other throughout the day. And at the end of the first day, we all sat down at the restaurant that was at the hotel, and we just started talking. And over a round, as I like to say, of fine San Diego craft beer, the idea came out that we wanted to start a podcast or something where authors at our level, which was just beginning, were talking about writing. I mean, we've all attended conferences or listened to podcasts of fairly established writers and talking about the successes and, my book's going to be a movie, or, hearing those stages that we're just not quite there yet. Of course, we have dreams and ambitions for all of our works to be, but we wanted something raw and something real. And we just vibed so well together that before we knew it, we were recording this podcast. And I think there's still times where we're not quite sure if it's real. and we just got a notice from Buzzsprout the other day, our hosting site, that we've had over 5,000 downloads. So Fantastic. It's been an incredible adventure. And that's a big part of it, is that we're sharing our adventures.
And I think that's one of the selling points for me that really brought me into the show is all of you bringing in your experiences with it and the way you just kind of play off each other, and the conversation is very organic, and it will kind of weave from one to another, but yet you'll pull yourself back onto topic as well. And there's lots of just wonderful conversations and making me think of like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that before. It's I really enjoy it.
Well, thank you. I'm really glad to hear that. And I mean, even we've now gotten into the habit of having notebooks next to us because we'll inspire each other, and we'll have our aha moments. And my computer right now is littered with sticky notes of ideas from the Semi-Sages for my current work. So I'm really glad to hear that it's inspiring for you as well.
Well, I mean, I know I'm not the only person from the sounds of it that was very inspired by one of your most recent episodes with the vampire hummingbirds. That was frightening and exciting at the same time.
I know. I was like, oh, how does one even fight that? I mean, what is tennis rackets? I mean, it's just... it led to many follow-up conversations, I assure you.
Oh my gosh. Well, now, what is your background with writing? How did you get started?
I got started in the third grade. I remember my teacher at the time asking us to write a short story and told us all about, told us about how to write a story. And my very first story was called 3 Cool Cats. And it was about these 3 cats who had an oppressive dictator overlord dog. And they threw a rebellion, poisoned the dog, and life was great. And that was my first horror short story. Why I wasn't put in therapy, I'm not sure, but that sparked this storyteller within me, and I've been writing ever since. And it's almost a compulsion. I can't control it. It just goes. Um, I I write almost every day. Um, Not to say that I don't get writer's block, of course I do. But then I'll just move on to a different story for a little bit, just so I keep going. And I wrote all throughout college, and I kind of have a joke that I would have gotten much better grades, but I had novels to write. So it's a part of me. It comes to me like breathing. It's just what I do.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that it goes that far back for you, that you've been able to hang on to that dream, uh, going that far back to third grade. I remember writing short stories as a kid, just dreaming up all kinds of stuff and trying my hand here and there, and then having some teachers who were pushing me along the way, like, "Oh, this is great. You should write some more." But especially when I became a teenager, there was much more things. Like I was really into football and
Hmm.
working out and fishing or other things, and thinking like, well, I don't know how to become a writer, so that's not realistic. But it was just always there in the back of my mind, and thankfully I didn't give it up, and now I'm getting to
Good.
live out that part of it, and I can still go fishing. So,
Yes, because balance is good.
yeah, exactly. Well, it's one I like that you have a bit of a mix. You talked about your first story had a kind of a horror slant, and you are a member of the Horrors Writers Association, but you also write in fantasy, and you're acting president. Are you still acting president of the San Diego Writers and Editors Guild?
Yes.
Okay. So you've got a little bit of back and forth and some paranormal mixed in. Do you have a preference that you think, or do you just kind of like playing the field and going wherever the muse leads you?
It's really funny. For the majority of my writing life, I've written fantasy. The Animal Court and Foreign and Domestic Affairs were my first two fantasy books, and I call them light fantasy because they're the introduction to the world that I've created. And for the most part, most of my fantasy books take place within the same world. And I've written over a dozen novels that take place in that world, in that setting. Just haven't gotten them out yet because I have a very specific way I'm trying to release them. But over 2020, there were just things happening in my life that drew me towards contemporary thrillers. And so I wrote a book called The Complex, which I'm not releasing just yet, for a few reasons, but one of which is that a lot of it drew from what was happening in 2020. And, from the pandemic to just the quarantine and the horrors of all that. And I felt like it was too soon to release it. So I'm going to give a little space between 2020 and The Complex. But in writing that, I realized that I really enjoyed writing thriller, suspense, and horror. And so joined the Horror Writing Society. And then I realized, oh my gosh, like I have a dozen short stories that I've already written. Why haven't I done anything with these? And I sewed them together and made Tiny Dreadfuls, which is my collection of horrors, oddities, and tales of the dark. And it really just kicked off for me that I don't have to be married to any one genre. And that was really my aha moment, if you will, because I didn't really think about it too much. I'd never thought I could write a contemporary story or a story that takes place in a contemporary setting. And so, or that I'd even be writing historical pieces. My writing partner, Teresa Halverson, who you're familiar with, she and I wrote a book called Lost Aboard, which is a creative nonfiction piece that takes place aboard San Diego's historic tall ship Star of India. So the last year has really taught me that it's okay to broaden your horizons in writing genres and have fun with it. And that's really all that matters.
Absolutely. Well said. And I love that. I love that exploratory feel to it of even after so many years of experience, you're still finding your voice wherever that may take you. I never expected that. I always thought growing up, mostly I grew up in the like 70s and 80s. So I just thought, okay, I'm writing action because of all the action movies I grew up watching. You know, everything was Schwarzenegger and Stallone. So it's okay, get a group of guys, we're all muscle bound and we're going to go after the guys. But I'm writing nothing like that now. I'm writing more thrillers and even some paranormal and creepy stuff that I'm like, where is this coming from? I don't understand it, but I love it.
Right. Oh, I totally understand that. I constantly have people telling me that I am the silver lining queen, and yet at the same time, I'm writing these really dark horror stories. So it's a very similar, like, where is this coming from? What did I watch? What inspired this?
Oh my gosh. So now you had Foreign and Domestic Affairs came out in 2019, which looks like it that did really well, and followed up by Animal Court, which I just heard about some of that on the show, and tell us about each of these so that people can know what else you have to offer.
So the Animal Court is the first in the series, and it is about a country on the verge of collapse and one woman's struggle to save the country she loves. And I actually wrote that. I started writing that my senior year in high school because I was bored in PE and just was sitting there on the bleachers and was like, all right, well, I'm going to start writing now. And thus began the saga of this story. And it takes place in a country where men dominate the political scene. And this one woman, Gertrude, our protagonist, is fighting so hard to be both the voice for the people, to navigate the politics, and to get the ear of the king. And the king is just, he never should have been king. He was the last brother of 3 who never expected to be king. And so he lived a very rich, lavish lifestyle, which in their country's political system doesn't work because the king is a little bit more involved, or supposed to be a little bit more involved in the politics, but he's just not. And so he has been manipulated and twisted into believing that X is right, but it's actually ABC. And so the people are starving. And Gertrude goes back and forth between the country where she sees this and the capital, or to the capital where all the rich and powerful just stay in the castle. They don't leave Maltoro. So they're blind to what's happening, or they're helping to keep the king blind to what's happening. And so throughout the story, we go through the trials of Gertrude to convince the council that they have to stop being blind. They have to do something to save the people. And she has this huge elaborate plan, but because she's the only woman, nobody's listening to her.
Mm-hmm.
And so the king calls up his brothers, who are still alive, to come to counsel him. This is his last stand because he knows that things are starting to fall apart, but he just has no idea how to fix it. And bringing the brothers back brings up old rivalries and old hatreds among royal blood. So the whole story revolves around what's going to happen. Will the country collapse, or will Gertrude be able to save it in time?
Okay.
So then Foreign and Domestic Affairs, which is the sequel, takes place 20 years later and in the same country. And it revolves around the royal couple, a pair who never wanted to be king and queen, and their struggle between saving their family or their thrones. And one of the greatest comments I'm hearing about Foreign and Domestic Affairs is that even though this book takes place in a fantasy setting, even though it's about a king and a queen, so many people are telling me that they've also been in that situation where they had to choose between their job and their families, which ones to prioritize. I mean, how many of us have come home after a long day and just crashed on the couch or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
where I've got to squeeze in a couple more hours at work to get this report done, or whatever it is. Sometimes our work takes over our lives, and we have to really make that choice of, is this what I want, or do I want to be with my family? And it's an impossible decision for a king and queen to make. So the second book, Foreign and Domestic Affairs, is about the country where it stands now. The king and queen had to make some very difficult decisions at the end of the animal court to preserve the country. And so their iron fists had to fall. And so throughout the book, they are wondering, if anything happened, would we have the support of the people, or would they turn their backs on us? And then they also have some teenage sons who are getting into trouble, and as normal teenage sons do. And the book starts with them actually losing their youngest child and dealing with mourning while still being king and queen. So it's a complex story with a lot of very real relationship issues that we all have to deal with.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. And I didn't even realize that was one was the sequel to the other. I saw that, but then I was looking on here. I saw the book from 19, and now I see there that Foreign Domestic Affairs was a sequel. That sounds incredible, both of them. I'm gonna have to check these out.
I'm okay with that.
No problem. Read my book. Well, now before we go into your highlighted book for the day, Tiny Dreadfuls, I also wanted to kind of highlight some of your other services that you do on your website. You got some author services. One of these that's been quite the trending thing for the last, I'd say, year or two, which is book trailers. Now, how did you get into that?
I took a marketing for writing class, at the end of 2019 into early 2020. And we went through a variety of ways that you could market your books. And we spent pretty much an entire class talking about book trailers and what makes them successful, what makes them not successful, and how to really stand out. I mean, YouTube is on everybody's phone by default. So the potential marketing in book trailers is astronomical because it's such a great search engine. YouTube is such a great search engine, and that's the primary place where I post the trailers. So mid 2020, I started playing around with the idea of making a book trailer. Oh, and as part of the class too, we made book trailers, and I made a very, very, I look back at it now and it's like, oh, how far I've come. A very basic book trailer for my next book, Blue Dragon Society. And one day I started doing research into it and watching hours, because it's what we did in 2020. We sat and we streamed things of YouTube videos on book trailers. And I was like, I think I can do that. And so I started looking around for various services I could use, or stock video platforms, everything from Adobe to Canva to, what do I use now? To to filming my own. Actually, I ended up getting a really nice Sony camera to support this endeavor, and it's a lot of fun. Pulling a story together that you've either read or that you've written and turning into a cinematic trailer. And I say cinematic because there is a standard that I'd like to help other authors reach with this, and not just from me providing the service. Any one of us could go and buy stock video, or you record on our phones a video for our book. We could ask our besties to be the actors in it. And there's nothing wrong with that. If they're really good, go for it. But the thing is book trailers don't have the best reputation right now. It's considered very mom and pop at the moment, which is, again, there's nothing wrong with that. Excuse me, not mom and pop. They're considered very amateur. So one of my goals is to help other authors reach a higher standard, even if they make it themselves, to just use the right resources to make sure they source videos responsibly as well, and to create a higher standard of these trailers so that book trailers become a very go-to way to find books.
Yeah. I think it's gonna catch on. I really do. I mean, they're fantastic to look at. You know, they're the ones that are well done, like what the ones I watched on your site. They capture your imagination and make you want to go. And what's next? What do I need? Oh, I got to find out more. And I think it's going to catch on. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago hearing about a guy, one of the authors I follow. He started writing Westerns, and he just wanted to write Westerns. He was like, I love them. I know they're not selling right now, but I really want to do it. And all of a sudden in the last year, maybe it was the pandemic or whatever the deal was, but all of a sudden Westerns started catching on, and his back catalog of Westerns started selling like crazy. And now they're selling really good. And, you know, you never know. The book trailers it could be something like that. Just the right person or the right trend all of a sudden hits, and next thing you know, everybody's doing a book trailer, and why not jump on it now?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It is very much an untapped resource available to us. So I highly recommend authors do book trailers for their stories. And like you said, it inspires that, oh, what happens next, which is what we all want.
Absolutely. So now it sounds like your 2020, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. It sounds like your 2020 was fairly productive, in spite of the state of affairs worldwide. How would you describe your 2020?
2020. I had been working a full-time job, as many of us were, and March 13th, we had a big meeting at my work where we were all laid off. The entire business was laid off because we were a museum, and you know, the world was ending. So the world as we knew it was done, basically, and nobody knew it was going to come. So we had to close our doors. So I went home with one of my friends who was also laid off, and my boyfriend, and we drank a round of Coronas because it felt appropriate. And then the next day I sat down and I started writing. And that was my way of dealing with it, of escaping from basically the world collapsing around us. I just started writing, and I kind of saw my being what eventually became just furloughed as a gift. Because again, I'm the queen of silver lining. So, you know, 2020 was devastating for so many people, and yeah, I don't want to miss that, but I don't want to not acknowledge that, but I chose to not fall into depression, because I know that that's something I do. I'm very lucky with my depressive states, so they'll fall for about a day, and it's just a day of the case of the grays, as I say. Sometimes it'll last a little longer, but I just sit on the couch and I'm brain dead. And I knew that if I didn't dive full on into my writing, into learning new things, and to creating, that I had the potential of being in the grays for a very long time. And so I wrote the draft of Blue Dragon Society. I wrote The Complex. I learned about book trailers, about cover design, and it kept me going. And it kept me positive, and having my writing or my creative projects really just kept me moving and breathing and focused on what was important in my world and the things that I could control. And as we know, 2020 had several things that we couldn't control. And so having that, I don't want to say that power, but having that, well, I guess, yeah, that power within me, which was inspired by my writing and my craft, just kept me going and kept a smile on my face.
Oh, great, great. I mean, that speaks to me and at the heart of who I am too. I'm a very positive, and there's always a good spin on something and silver lining. I am Captain America's twin. Like, nope, it's all right. I'm not giving up. We're gonna keep going. Come on, Avengers Assemble. Let's go. I can do this all day, and about to a fault at times. And it's really hard to get me way down, but and I know that can be very annoying to my wife sometimes, but but it keeps me strong, and it makes me be her rock, and she's mine. So whenever things do get to us, then we're able to kind of bounce off each other and be like, it's gonna be all right. And I appreciate that. I like how you just kind of took, what everybody went through last year and spun it into, all right, well, what can I do now?
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of that, what can we expect from you next? I heard a little bit about it, but what is Blue Dragon Society?
So the Blue Dragon Society is a book I've been working on for about 20 years.
I love it.
And,
Love it.
and I write, and I know you're a big fan of Scrivener, and I have to say I'm a big fan of Scrivener. Fantastic writing tool. And my biggest issue with Blue Dragon Society is I've been writing it for 20 years. And so I have 20 years worth of notes around this piece. And once I found Scrivener, I was able to finally organize everything into one place. And it's just taken off. And last year, I was trying to bend it to what my 13-year-old self wanted it to be. And that doesn't really work. So, so after having read several wonderful fantasies and several wonderful mysteries, I have about 2/3 of the way through the rewrite of last year's version, and I'm so happy with it. And what it is it's about a city, the capital of the country Bangladesh, where these strange murders start happening. And it's not just one murder or two or three, it's 14 murders. And for whatever reason, the police in this capital have been turning their eye to it. And the headmistress of the Academy Dova gets involved in this because of her specialties in race relations, particularly with werewolves. And so the communities are screaming that this is being done by a werewolf, And she goes, no, this is being done by demons. And so it's believed that the demons are gone because the Battle of Hell's Gate shut their way in. But Diane is adamant that this is demons. And there's only one person that is still familiar with how to hunt them, but he wants nothing to do with the capital or the Blue Dragon Society and the Demon Hunting Society. And so the rest of the story follows is this demon, are these murders being done by a demon or something else? And this is the first in a trilogy. And I'm so excited for the story, mostly because it's been with me for so long. I mean, I've known these characters longer than most of my friends at this point. And it's what I'm kind of aiming for is Sherlock Holmes meets Game of Thrones.
Okay. Wow. That's quite the combination.
I find that genre blending is a lot of fun. And being sort of, I don't want to say trapped within a single genre is limiting, but 2020 kind of taught me that it's your book.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yes.
Write what calls to you, and of course have beta readers within your genre that are like, this is a stretch too far, or wow, this is exactly what you'd expect of this, and have those guiding points along with you. But when it really boils down to it, just write the story you want to write.
I agree. Yeah, when you do that, that's when your passion comes through, and that's when you tell your best stories, as opposed to trying to write what you think people want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
because you're never gonna you're not gonna reach that. You're not gonna get what people really want. It'll kind of it won't be as pure.
Yeah. And like you said, your passion really comes out on the page, and that's what people will be drawn to.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, so many wonderful things. I'm so excited for this. Where can people find and follow you, Sarah?
They can find me on my website at sfaxon.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Instagram's s_Faxon, and you could just find me on Facebook by looking up Faxon. Also, one of the semi-sages of the pages, and we're on every major podcasting app.
Wonderful. Yes, and Teresa gave me the link so that people can follow that as well and tune in live with the show. Go into the room that you do this in, so that I'll make sure and share that again with this episode. This is a lot of fun, and I've had a really good time.
I've had a great time too. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before we hand it over, we're going to talk here just for a second about Sarah's upcoming or her newest book, Tiny Dreadfuls. Prepare yourself for a tour through the dark. Inspired by classic Victorian penny dreadfuls, this collection of horror shorts and oddities from award-winning author Sarah Faxon takes you through the cursed orchids, opium-stoked alleyways, haunted houses, and to the high seas. With some of these stories based on real-life paranormal encounters, this book is a must-read for those who love the fanciful and unexplainable. Oh, I love it. This is going to be exciting. What can we expect from this book, or what? I don't know. Is there anything you need to set up for this?
So each one of these stories are independent, and I will be reading from The Confession, which I'm being asked to make a novel out of because people like it so much.
Oh, wow. Awesome. Okay, wonderful. Well, then, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to hand the floor over to my guest, Sarah Faxon, with one of their short stories from Tiny Dreadfuls.
Tale 3, The Confession. As he stood outside of the police station alone, taking in the last puffs of a bum cigarette, the detective took a look up to the heavens above. The sky was black. Only a sliver of a moon glared back. Those starless nights were relatively uncommon. Tonight, the sight of the darkness gave the detective an unexpected chill. On paper, this case looked like others he'd seen before. It had the makeup of any other youth gone bad. A recent drastic move, a step-parent, isolation, and to top it off, the kid had a record. Assault charges followed him. The kid had convinced a jury that the fight was in self-defense from bullies, but the ink on his sheet did not bode him favors tonight. Times had changed so much from when Detective DeVita was a kid. When the bullies on the playground made fun of his mom for being a single parent, he'd deck them and everyone moved on. Now, a kid did that, it was assault. Tonight, both the kid's parents were dead, and his house lay in rubble from a fire that most said he started. How else could an 18-year-old escape from a level 3 blaze relatively untouched by the flames? This was one of the countless questions that Detective DeVita intended to find out. Tossing his cigarette, the detective returned to the bustling police station. The phones were going off the hook. The two people managing the lines tonight did their best to keep up, but the constant ringing did little to help Detective DeVita's head. He hated this time of year. Halloween was not a time of laughter, tricks, and treats. It was a hell-inspiring 24 hours when every wacko and loner decided to run rampant, and that they had to deal with. "Hey," DeVita grumbled in a greeting to his partner who was approaching with the case file. "Talks just came back." Detective Hanks patted the side of the 2-inch thick manila folder. "You won't believe it." They began to walk toward the interrogation room, which was at the back of the precinct. "Kids clean?" "Squeaky." DeVita took the file and opened it up to the page labeled with the blue tab. The report said it in black and white. The kid's story about not being high or buzzed at the time of the fire panned out. "So he's just a run-of-the-mill psycho." Detective Hanks rolled her eyes. "There's something off about this case. Well, I'm going in to talk to the kid now. You'll be in the booth, right? I'm not missing this. Detective Hanks left her partner at the first door. Good luck. Thanks. He saluted her, then opened the door. The detective entered the plain-walled interrogation room, a scene he felt more comfortable in than at home. There was a number of things a veteran detective such as himself looked for the second he stepped into the room. First and foremost, was the detainee awake? It seemed backward to new recruits and to those who had no experience in investigations, but for the most, planning a murder is a sleep-depriving ordeal, one that has a host of demons screaming in your head. So once the deed is done, and if you're in a quiet, safe place, the adrenaline drops you into dreams. Detective DeVita half expected this kid to be sleeping, but the kid was awake, wide awake. Though deep circles under his brown eyes suggested the boy hadn't slept in winks, he looked days away from an adrenaline crash. Perhaps he was terrified that he had been caught so easily. Time would tell. All right, Detective DeVita sat down at the desk, deciding to take a more firm, yet soft-spoken approach with this kid, who, drugs or not, already seems so strung out and on the edge. They said you wanted to talk to me. Just take your time. There's no rush. The boy's eyes never ceased their scanning of the room, but he did not appear to be looking for anything in particular. The black soda in the unsipped cup between his hands rippled from the reverberation of his knee, bouncing up and down beneath the table. Okay, the boy's shaky voice started. He pushed his ear-length hair back, and for a split second, the detective could see some of the deep scratches noted in the report the first responders made. From the file that the detective had reviewed before stepping out to catch a smoke, the detective knew that the boy's skin was riddled with similar scratches that looked to have been done by fingernails. I'll tell you, the boy's voice trembled as he spoke. But there's no way you'll believe me. I gotta tell someone. The detective nodded his head. I'm listening. Sighing hard, the boy took several deep breaths before mustering up the words. We moved into this stupid town from the city a few months ago. My stepdad got a new job out here, so my mom and I picked up our entire lives and moved. Aside from the fact that the town sucked, everything was fine at first. Until the day I got into a fight after school. That's when everything all started. My mom and stepdad were pissed. He started yelling at me, and then my mom started yelling at him. And in the midst of everything, a family picture we'd had on the wall of the living room fell. The boy hesitated. His shoulders drew up. It stopped our fight, and we just sort of blamed it on an earthquake that we didn't notice. This is California, or something like that. But we were wrong. We're not... The boy stopped. His eyes darted back and forth across the table. The detective watched him weighing what he was trying to say. We're not a, quote, religious family or nothing like that. We'd go to church on Christmas and Easter, and that was pretty much it. But once things really started going in the house, that's when we became believers. But apparently too late. The boy snuffled hard, wiped his running nose with the sleeve of his loose-fitting black sweatshirt. My parents started fighting all the time, like really bad, screaming and yelling. They'd never been like that before. I know you probably think that I hated my stepdad, but I didn't, okay? He was all right. He always treated me and my mom right, you know? But once he started screaming at her, that was it. I knew it wasn't right. Like it wasn't him. After the first few nights following the first few fights, that's when things started getting nuts. I'd wake up in the middle of the night. It was really weird. Like I felt like something was in there with me, staring at me, but there was nothing there. My mom said that there was one morning when she was getting ready for work, that when she was in the shower, there was someone in there with her, creeping on her. She was terrified. She came out screaming. That was just a day or two before. He hung his head over the table. It's okay, son, Detective DeVita encouraged. Take a minute or a drink if you need. The boy turned his face back up and shook his head. It's just so much. He contemplated the drink in front of him, but continued without a sip. That night, we all had another big fight, my parents and me. It was the worst. I can't remember what we fought about because of what happened. We were in the living room, and we started to hear doors slamming upstairs, open and shut, open and shut. All the photos we had on the walls were shaking like there was an earthquake. But the ground, it wasn't shaking. It was horrible. I've never been so scared in my life. But I was still so mad from the fight, you know? So I started screaming at the house, how I hated that place and how it needed to burn. The boy stopped because he could see the judgment in the eyes of the detective. Look, man, I know this sounds nuts, but I'm not making this up. Look what it did to me. The boy popped up out of his chair and ripped up his hoodie. All across the boy's stomach, chest, sides, and back were the blaring scratches that looked not to be caused by human fingers, but by claws. What's more, the EMTs had addressed his scratches. The white bandages still covered a number of the boy's reported injuries, but there were now new welts, some with dried and fresh blood smeared across his skin. DeVita leaned back in his chair. He had seen the file the EMTs had provided, and those photos did not look half as terrible as these, nor had there been this many. It's like they're fresher now. Like the scratches were just made. There's no way our guys would have let those scratches uncovered. Unless the kid did it to himself in here. DeVita shot a glance at the boy's hands. His nails were so short from being chewed, there was no way he could have done this with his hands. Maybe he has something else on him. That's even harder to believe than negligent EMTs. Hanks checked him herself. What the hell is going on? The detective inhaled, held his breath, then released a drawn-out exhale. There's gotta be an explanation. Maybe the kid's got a crazy girlfriend he hasn't told us about because she put him through, or maybe she even made him do this shit. Before the detective could say or ask anything, the boy continued. It all stopped after the first scratches. Until tonight, the boy sobbed. Everything went to hell tonight. My mom had brought home a Bible. As far back as I can remember, we'd never had one before. As soon as she crossed the front door, they knew. They fucking knew. All the lights began to fade, then light up again, fade, then light up. We heard what sounded like, I don't know, a tapping coming from my room upstairs. So my mom and me and my stepdad went up there to see what was going on. The lights wouldn't turn on. It was so dark in there, but that same feeling that I'd had that something was in the room was back, and I knew my folks could feel it too. Something began to speak to us, but it wasn't right. It was something between a growl and a whisper. I couldn't hear it exactly, but I could understand it. Like it was in my head. It was saying, get out, get it out, over and over again. I knew exactly what it meant. It wanted the Bible out, but that was the last thing I was about to do. I ran downstairs where my mom had left the Bible, leaving my folks upstairs. I grabbed it, and the second I did, I heard screams. My parents were screaming. The tears streaming down the boy's face were running into his mouth and down onto his heart as he spoke. I bolted back up, but halfway up the stairs, there was fire. It was so hot, there was nothing I could do. There was this horrible feeling like something was pulling me in two directions. One toward the fire, one back down the stairs. It felt like I was being dragged downward, like my feet didn't even touch the ground. Then I felt it. The scratches. He motioned to his stomach, like something was trying to rip me apart. I must have blacked out or something happened to me, and I just don't fucking know what. But the next thing I knew, I was out front, watching my home, my life, my parents burn. The boy looked straight up into the eyes of Detective DeVita. I know you think I'm nuts and that you're probably going to lock me away forever, but this is what happened. I swear to you, there's something evil in that house, and it destroyed us. The detective had been watching, listening to everything the boy shared. He remained still a moment more, trying to see if the boy was going to prove his madness and shout, "Happy Halloween!" But he didn't. The detective tried to swallow, but his throat was so dry he couldn't. Clearing his throat, DeVita leaned back over the table. He tried to remember the questions he had entering the room. He tried to create new inquiries, but his mind was stuck. He couldn't get over those claw marks. And the kid's story. It's either a hell of an imagination he has, or... Thank you, Adam, Detective DeVita said as he began to stand. I'm going to get you some stuff to help you freshen up, and I'll send a medic in here to look at those scratches again, okay? I'll be right back, okay? Adam nodded once. Detective DeVita removed himself from the room. He did not stop when questioned by his partner, who came running after him. He continued through the station all the way back to the spot at which he had been smoking his cigarette. He wished he had bummed a second. Leaning his back against the railing of the stairs leading to the parking lot, the detective once more stared up into the black sky. He thought back to the scene he had walked in on 9 hours ago. A Bible on the grass on the front lawn, the house smoldering. Deep within the rubble and the ashes, the text had found bodies, but not complete bodies. The bones had been arranged. A head and 2 femurs, crossed as if designed like a skull and crossbones and a stupid pirate flag. The most unnerving aspect was that, at first inspection, none of the bones displayed any typical trait of having been through extreme heat and fire. It was as if the flesh had been stripped from the bones, and the bones placed at the scene of the crime after the fire. Another chill ripped through the detective. Holding on tight to the pocket rosary his grandmother had given him when he was around Adam's age, he felt it as true as anything in his heart. There's something else going on.
All right, that was Sarah Faxon reading a sample chapter from her new book, Tiny Dreadfuls. Like I said, I told you it was creepy, and it definitely leaves you wanting to know what's going on. And I've got to get this book. I've got to check it out so I can learn what's happening. Hey, if you want to find out more about Sarah, you can click the link in the show notes for her Facebook, Instagram, the podcast, the Semi-Sages. You can go back to episode 181 with Teresa Halverson and hear more about her collaboration that they did. Don't forget to also follow our podcast friends, our partners, and sponsor, and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out next week when I'm back with Michael Rose and his debut novel, The Sorting Room. Until then, take care, everybody.
This has been a presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.